Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, a channel about making computer role-playing games using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. So we're looking at the Mini Rogue adaptation that I've been working on for the last few videos. And if you were to look at it recently, you would notice a slight change. It's still not approaching a playable game, but you would notice one thing or two things that are different. This spread of cards, there's an extra card here. That's not really an important thing. I just put that in so I could check that it was working properly. But you might notice that there's a little counter now that matches the avatar that you choose, and that counter displays where you are in the spread of cards. So you start interacting with this card here, and then you'll get a choice of these two, and then you'll interact with this one, and then you get a choice of these two, and then you'll interact with this one. And if you choose the male avatar, of course, the counter will show the male picture instead. And secondly, as you've probably noticed as I've been moving my mouse around, you have more detailed hover text. So before it just said commercial planet, abandoned spaceship, space pirates, etc., the names of the different cards. Well, now it's got all of the details of what you encounter on that particular card in case you don't remember. So you can look ahead and hopefully sort of make better, make more strategic decisions as you go. So in this video, I want to talk about the hover text in particular. So that's what it looks like. If you want to read any of those, pause the video, or probably better still, download the zip file from itch.io that has all the files, and then you can look at the game, or the what will be a game, and you can also look at the code as well. So let's X out of that, and I will. These are the oops. These are the original cards, which we'll be sort of referring back to, and I'll show you how I've adapted them, because of course we're changing from a fantasy dungeon crawling theme to a science fiction sort of flying from planet to planet theme. So I had a sort of bit of thought as to, well, what's a trap in the context of that, for example. But we'll get to that. Anyway, let's look at the code. So I've already talked about how to do that text that comes up when you move your mouse over something. That text is usually called hover text, or it's sometimes called mouseover text. And the basic way that you do it, I'll just get into I'll make a new passage so I can. There's a couple of different ways to do it, but the way that I've done it in this particular game is like this. You go, now you probably remember that the code for an image is something like this. You have the square bracket, you have IMG, and then you have the location and name of the picture that you want to load. So it might be art /, so you might have a folder called art, and then you might have spaceship.png. I've got ones that are all single letters. So commercial planet, the card for commercial planet is c.png. So there's an example of a command to bring up an image. Now, if you want to have hover text over it, the way that I've found that is slightly easier is using div title. So here's an example of what I mean. What you do is you start a div, which is a paragraph, and normally you would just do like that to indicate that the paragraph is starting, and then you have this slash div to show that the paragraph is ending. But you can also, optionally, put a title in here. And the title is the same thing as the hover text or the mouse over text. So div title is, this is a picture of a, this is a picture of an alien looking plant. You have to have that text in quotes. So if I entered this code, that would make this picture come up if there was such a picture. If there was no picture, you'd get that broken image graphic that you get when it can't find a picture that you may have seen on the internet. And then when you moved your mouse over either the picture or that sort of error picture, a yellow box would come up, and in that yellow box would be the text. And that's really how it works. It's very straightforward. The only other thing is that you can't use quite a lot of HTML commands that you can't use within this text, which you normally can use in text. So for example, if I was to do this, so I have less than I greater than, if I was to do just that line on a web page, the text would come up in italics. If I was to do a B / B, then the text would come up bold. And if I did, I think it's U and /U, then it would come up underlined. Underlining isn't used very much, but it's still there. You can't use any of those within this title. If I did this, it wouldn't come up with this is a picture of an alien looking plant, but in italics, it would just come up with less than I greater than, this is a picture of an alien looking plant, less than / I greater than. In other words, it wouldn't recognize these as instructions as to how to lay out the text. They would just take it as the characters. The other thing that's important that you can't use, that I frequently use, is these line breaks. So normally less than BR greater than means essentially do one of these, do a carriage return. So if we do BR, so if we do say text and then 2 BRs, that's the equivalent of going text, carriage return, carriage return. So that lets us separate different paragraphs or different bits of text, or we can separate a title from the main text, etc. Because we've put a command in, you probably remember, we've put a command in that says not to count our carriage returns as carriage returns on the screen. We need to do that because we need to separate our code and make it easy to follow. But because we've done that, we need to some way of then saying, okay, but this is a carriage return, and that's what that BR command is. But unfortunately, those BR commands don't work in the titles of paragraphs. Again, it would just treat that as, oh, he wants me to print less than BR greater than. It would just print the individual characters. So what we do instead for the breaks is we go and hash, which is the one above the 3, at least it is on my keyboard, 13. And hash 13. So that hash is like if you were doing a hashtag. And that and is like, it's the ampersand. It's the single character that indicates and. So ampersand hash 13, that it will treat as a carriage return. So that's the main. That's a sort of refresher of the main way that mouse over text works. And that's mostly what we've done, but we have a little bit of a complication. And to find out what that complication is, let's have a look back at, well, let's have a look at, now let's do it this way. We'll have a look at the H array Now, we've dealt with arrays quite a lot. You use arrays quite a lot in programming games, or at least I do. And we've used numbers to indicate the different slots in an array. So if we have the array H, we might have $H1, $H0, $H100, and so on. And then we might have two-dimensional arrays, so we might have $H215, $H4 -3, etc., etc. Usually you wouldn't have negative numbers because there's not a lot of use for them. It usually works out that you only use positives, but you certainly can use negative numbers if you need to. But what I don't think I've talked about, at least I haven't talked about in great detail, is you can also use letters as the names of slots. So as well as H2, you can have let's say HS, something like that, and that is useful if you want to refer to, if you want to have a series of single letters, and then each of those single letters refers to something in the array. And that's what I want to do, because the cards, I named the cards with single letters. So A is the abandoned spaceship card, C is the commercial planet card, P is the peaceful planet card, and so on. And so when I have the hover text for card, the abandoned spaceship card, the easiest way to do it is to have $H, and then instead of a number, I could have a number, and then I could have another array which says which number relates to which letter. But a more quick way is just to have the slots in the array indicated by letters. You can have letters and numbers, by the way, if you want to. I'm not sure what a situation would be where that would be the best way to do it, but certainly there's nothing in the program that stops you doing it. So, for example, $H quote A, or $H square bracket quote A quote N square bracket. In other words, the almost the eighth slot in $H, the slot in the $H array that has the value $A, is this long text. And this text, of course, is the hover text for the abandoned spaceship card. So I've got abandoned spaceship, and then I've got that n/13, n/13. So that prints the title, and then has a couple of returns, and then it has all of the stuff that can happen in relation to the abandoned spaceship. So this is all just taken straight from the rules. If you defeated the space pirates in this area, you get 2 credits. If not, you get 1 credit. And 13, which means return. You also have a 1 in 3 chance of finding a randomly chosen piece of technology, which has one of the following effects. And then there's a list of all the different bits of technology that you might find. You notice that there's a space between the and #13 and the 1. I found that when I didn't have that space, it didn't work, and I suspect that's because it was treating it as and #131. So I had to put a space whenever there was a number straight after that, and that's true of all of the numbered lists. I couldn't find a way to. I mean, there probably is a way, but I couldn't find a way to have that number right there. But it looks fine. It doesn't look bad, but it is necessary to do that. Just bear in mind that if you have another number after that, it might think that means and #131, which will be a different special character and not the one you want. So this one's fairly straightforward, because this one is the same in every area. It's the way that this game works is you go through the different levels and you keep encountering traps and monsters and etc. And some of the things are the same each time. This abandoned spaceship is the equivalent of the treasure card, and that's the same every time. But other things get are different in different areas, and specifically it gets harder. So, for example, if you've played dungeon crawling games, you've probably guessed that the monsters get harder as you go further through the dungeon. And that's true in video games as well, of course. The enemies usually get harder and harder. So if we look at the monster card here, we can see that on level 1, they do 2 damage, and you get 1 XP reward. On level 2, they do 4 damage, and you get 1 XP. Level 3, they do 6 damage, and you get 2 XP, and so on. Their hit points are the same. No, actually, their hit points change as well. Their hit points are the number of the area plus the roll of a die, so they'll tend to get slightly more hit points as you go through as well. The difference between area and level is that the levels are sets of areas. So the first 2 areas is level 1, and then the next 2 areas is level 2, and then the next 3 areas is level 3. So a level is like a group of areas. That's why you have a reference to both dungeon area and level. They're sort of 2 different things. But anyway, so they get more more dangerous as you go through the game, and that means that there isn't a single bit of text that I can put in this array for the equivalent of the monsters, which is the space pirates. The space pirates are the converted version of the monsters. So what do I do there? Well, I'll tell you what I've done. If you look at this text, you can see the same thing, space pirates, and then there's the 2 carriage returns, or the enters. It says the pirate ship has between square bracket A end square bracket and square bracket B end square bracket hull points. They do C damage per shot, and you get D experience for defeating them. So what does that mean? Well, what it means is that it starts with this text, and then each time we display it, we're going to replace these letters in square brackets. We're going to replace A, B, C, and D with the appropriate numbers. So I'll show you how that works. And there's quite a lot of others as well. The hostile aliens, the spaceship has E hull points and does F damage per shot, and if you defeat it, you will G, and so on. And I think there's one more that, this one, the alien ruins. There's a small chance that you can encounter a drone, and again, the drone has a different number of hull points and a different amount of damage depending on where you are in the game. So let's have a look at the code that does that. So I might as well get rid of that. We don't need that anymore. Okay, so here we have the display page. This is the page that prints up all the cards. It prints the current state of the game, basically. And as I've discussed in a previous video, it is a HTML table, a big HTML table. And we go through and in different cells in this table, we print the first card in the shuffled array, and then the second card in the shuffled array, and so on. So we set Z equals 1, and we include this other page, this new page, which I haven't talked about yet, which is called card. So you'll probably recall that we've shuffled in the previous screen, we shuffled the S array. We started with them in a arbitrary order, and we shuffled them all around, so they'll the H one will always be at the end because that's how the game works, but these ones, the first 6, will be in a random order, and that S array will tell us which cards are going to come up. So we go with display, we set Z equal to whichever card we happen to be displaying at the moment. And when I say which card, I don't mean like Z equals 1, the 1, or when Z equals 2, the 2 refers to the second card in S. It doesn't refer to a particular card it doesn't refer to the same card each time. it refers to where the card is in the spread, basically. So we set Z equal to 1 or 2 or whatever, and we include card. So here's where the code happens. Now there's as you can see, there's quite a lot of different codes. So I'm only going to do one example because they're all basically the same. I'll do the example of A and B and C. So we set X equal to $H square bracket $S square bracket $Z N square bracket N square bracket. So that's a fairly complicated bit of code. And as usual, when we're trying to understand it, you work from the inside out. So we start with Z. Well, that is the number. What number of the car? What number in the spread are we looking at? Okay, $SZ. Well, that's this array. It's the S for shuffled, and it's going to be, so S1 is going to be one of A, C, P, Q, R, or S, whichever card ended up in that position. So we're going to end up, up to here, we're going to end up with something like C, or A, or P, or Q, or Q, there we go. And then so when we say HSZ, well, it's going to be something like HA or HQ, for example. And so let's look at what that would be. Well, that would be one of this array. So it would be one of these long bits of text that are that is the hover text. So let's say, for example, that we happen to get S. We happen to get the Space Pirates. So we have this great big bit of text. I'll just, oops. Trying to, oh my goodness. I'll just copy that so we can paste it down here and have a look at it in isolation. So we end up with this a bit of text like this: Space Pirates N13 N13. The pirate ship has between A in square brackets and B in square brackets hull points. They do C damage per shot. You get D experience for defeating them. So what does all that mean? What do A, B, and C and D mean? Well, A means $A plus 1, and B means $A plus 6. That's what this list of what the different things mean tell us. So we know that A is which area you're in. You start in area 1 and you keep going until you die or you win the game. So what does that mean? Well, let's look back at the rules. This is the monster card that we're talking about. The Space Pirates is the equivalent of the monster card. We know that the hit points of the monster is the dungeon area plus 1d6. So let's say the dungeon area is 3. We know that means the monster is going to have between 4 and 9 hit points, or hull points as we're calling them in this, because it's the fiction of the game. It's spaceships fighting each other. More generally, we know that the hit points of the monster are going to be somewhere between the area plus 1 and somewhere between the area plus 6. So that's the minimum and the maximum hit points. So that makes sense if we look at where A and B are. It says the pirate ship has between A and B hit points. So if we were in area 3, it would say the pirate ship has between 4 and 9 hull. Sorry, I'm probably going to keep saying hit points, even though it's meant to be hull points. Sorry. The pirate ship has between 3 and 9 hull points. So yeah, that makes sense. We know that the maths of that works out. That the lowest hit points is the area is $A plus 1, in other words, the current area plus 1, and the highest hit points is $A plus 6. They do C damage per shot. Well, let's have a look back at this and have a look at the damage. We can see that the damage depends on the level, which is sort of a function of the area, but it's not exactly, it's not a simple formula, and I'll show you how that works. So on level 1 they do 2 damage, on level 2 they do 4 damage, on level 3 they do 6 damage, on level 4 they do 8 damage, and on level 5 they do 10 damage. Well, what's the general rule then? Well, the general rule seems to be that the damage is the area times 2. So how do we turn the area times 2 into a formula using the variables that we have? Well, we have $M, $A times 2, because $M is what level a given area is. So for example, if we were in area 3, we would look at M3 and we would see that that was 2, and that tells us that area 3 is in level 2. So we would go in area 3, it should be doing 4 damage per shot, because MA times 2 will be 4. And then you get D experience for defeating them. Well, let's have a look at what the formula there is. Well, again, it seems to depend on the level, and it looks like we get 1 XP if we're in the first 2 areas, 2 XP if we're in area 3 or area 4, and 3 XP if we're in area 5. So let's look at how we, and actually a lot of things in the game are like that. It seems a lot of the time it's area 1 or 2, there's one thing, area 2, area 3 or 4, there's another, and then area 5, there's yet another thing. So let's go back to the code and see how we turn that into maths, basically. Well, we can see what we've done here. It says depends on $MA, in other words, depends on the level. 1 or 2 becomes 1, 3 or 4 becomes 2, and 5 becomes 3. So there's not a sort of simple formula. It's not like one of these. We have to sort of, as it were, code it by hand. So let's go to over here, back to card, where we're trying to work out what to do with this hover text. We are going to use, so we have, up to this point, we have, oops, sorry, that wasn't meant to happen. There we go. Up to this point, we have a long bit of text that's like that, and we now need to get rid of these A's and B's, etc. And how do we do that? Well, we use .replace. .replace is a command that works like this. We say set Z equals X dot replace, or we can have the two variables be the same. Set Z equals Z dot replace. So Z dot replace just means Z, but alter it in the way that I'm going to tell you. And the way it works is we have the original text that we want to look for there, and then we have the new text after it. So we have quote, look for the first instance of the original of this text, and it's case sensitive. So if you do it all in capital letters, it won't find lowercase letters, and vice versa. And then turn it into whatever the new text is. And if there's two instances of original, it'll leave the second one. It won't replace the second one, it'll only replace the first one. And so you'd have to do the command twice if you want to replace both of them. But that doesn't occur here because we've only ever got one instance of A and one of B and one of C and one of D. So we set X equals X dot replace square bracket AN square bracket, and it has to be in quotes, with $A plus 1. Now you'll notice that that's not in quotes because I don't want to replace it with the characters $A plus 1, I want to replace it with the numeric value $A plus 1. And even though I'm replacing, so if $A is currently 3, I want to replace it with the character 4, for example. And even though that's replacing a string with a number, the program's fine with that. It just turns the number, it works out the number. So it says, okay, 3 plus 1, that's 4. And then it just turns it into a character and replaces the square bracket A and square bracket with that character. And we do the same with B. We replace that with A plus 6. We replace C with $MA times 2. And then we replace E, which we're not discussing at the moment. And then we have some slightly more complicated code where we say if MA is less than 3, in other words, if we're in level 1 or 2, then replace D with 1. And there's similar things happening for other cards as well. If MA is less than 5, in other words, if we're in levels 3 or 4, then replace that D string with 2. And otherwise, which will only happen when we're in level 5, we replace that square bracket D and square bracket, or square bracket capital D and square bracket with 3. And again, it'll go, okay, I mean, I could have put, and it probably would have been sort of more accurate, I guess, to do that, but I don't have to. It can see a number and goes, okay, well, obviously we're replacing something in a string, so I need to turn the number into a character or set of characters. It'll turn this 12 into the character 1 and the character 2 and then replace it in there. So once we've done all that, we do this, set y equals, and then it's div title plus x. Now remembering that x is this, x will now be this string, but with all of the A's and B's and C's and D's replaced. So it'll be something like, is it 2? I can't remember if it's 3 or 4, but I can't remember if these numbers are right, but it'll be something like this. It'll be the actual message that you're going to get. And so it says set y equals div title equals quote x, and then it's this image, and then it's img art slash spng, for example. Sorry, art slash s. This code is to do. This code we'll deal with later because it's to do with the counter that you saw, which I want to deal with in a separate video. So just ignore that for now. And then down here we add .png n square bracket and slash div, and then print y. So we will be printing something in the end of all that manipulation. We will end up printing something like this. Div title equals space pirates, carriage return. The pirate ship has between 3 and 9 hull points. They do 4 damage per shot. You get 2 experience for defeating them. And then the image of the space pirates card, and then the end of the div. And that is what we see when we play the game. And of course, it goes through and does that. We include card lots and lots of different times because we're doing it for each of the cards that we're displaying. And that is what you end up seeing when you play the game. You have the card, and then you have the hover text or the mouse over text. So that's how that bit of it's done. Hopefully in the next video I'll talk about how we got that player counter on there. It's fairly simple in code terms, but I'd sort of like to go through a little bit of how I actually made the graphic in using GIMP. But for now, I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.